We are watching the House, where there is a vote coming this hour on holding Trump aides Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino in criminal contempt of Congress for defying lawful subpoenas issued by the January 6th committee. Ignoring or defying those subpoenas, refusing to hand over documents, refusing to even come in and explain why they might have or claim to have any legal argument for defiance is what this is all boiled down to. So these Trump aides face what many expect to be a party line vote, which means they will lose and potentially be held in contempt if the Democrats hold together tonight. And that leaves a big decision over at the DOJ. The pressure is ratcheting up in many ways. Committee Chair Benny Thompson speaking to exactly this issue within the last hour.
We are here for this contempt process today, but the president's own daughter complied with the wishes of the committee. And I would think that if his daughter complied with the wishes of the committee, everyone else should, even the people who work for him.
Call it the Ivanka rebuttal, and if it sounds familiar, it is a contrast that we've been reporting out here as we've followed all of this, because there really is a tale of two batches of witnesses here. You have Donald Trump's own family and many aides and allies testifying. Ivanka Trump, her husband Jared Kushner, both voluntarily appeared, which would seem to really cast doubt on, if not completely blow up, the so-called privilege claims from people further away from Donald Trump than those staff and family members. So Navarro and Bannon don't have nearly the access or the roles of these family members who testified. Ivanka, for example, as we showed you, was right there next to her dad on January 6th, according to that footage. Jared Kushner was there the whole time through the campaign and all 4 years of the administration, unlike Steve Bannon. So here's where we are as we track this vote tonight. Former chief strategist and counselor to President Trump, Steve Bannon, already held in contempt of Congress. That was, you may recall, all the way back in October by the full House, like the vote coming up tonight. Then there's former chief of staff Mark Meadows, who partially initially cooperated, then pulled back. They held him in contempt on the House floor. And right now tonight, to put it all in context, you have these votes coming up on Dan Scavino, a digital aide, for contempt, and Peter Navarro, who worked as a White House advisor. The January 6th committee at the committee level has already issued those contempt charges for both these men, Scavino and Navarro. Tonight, you have the question over whether the full House will back them up as expected. We don't do predictions, but that is what is expected, while Bannon is the only one who has gone further now and been indicted criminally by the Justice Department on 2 counts. That's why he awaits a criminal trial. All 4 aides could, of course, face potential charges. Bannon is looking at up to a year in jail time, a $100,000 fine, depending on what happens. And he got another setback in his own case, separate from this vote tonight that we're going to get to a little later. But all eyes are on Navarro and Scavino as they break away from the Trump family members and the other cooperators to somehow argue that they don't have to show up, that, as the committee put it, they think they're above the law. We're going to get right into it right now with former RNC Chair Michael Steele and Justice Correspondent for The Nation, Elie Mystal. Welcome to both of you. These men are familiar in different ways. I'm going to get a little more into Navarro in a minute. But big picture, Michael, before we do that deep dive, what does it mean that this committee says that, and our sources say that it will get the backing of the Pelosi and the Democrats, they'll win this vote tonight, they say, and put this pressure on?
Well, it says, I think, a couple of things. One, that the committee meant what it said when it indicated from the very beginning of this process that they were going to take every step afforded to them to bring those who were somehow in whatever way involved to the committee, to make them account and answer for what happened on January 6th, to spell out their roles. These early efforts with Bannon and others have now borne the kind of fruit that has led to a Justice Department indictment. What it also says, I think, is a recognition that the clock on this effort is ticking. There's a major election coming up in November, at which point everyone in this town and outside of this town is anticipating Democrats losing control of the House. Thereby, this committee goes away. One of the first acts of Speaker McCarthy will be to banish these members of this committee to whatever hinterland they can if they don't draw them in for prosecution themselves. So the work now becomes even more accelerated and more important. And I think that goes back to a conversation we had last week, Ari, puts greater pressure on this Justice Department to, I want to say, get their act together, which they have. I don't want to infer that they don't, but to really tell the country what they're going to do with all of this evidence that's being amassed by the committee.
Yeah, and the DOJ has a big job here, but they're not at 100%, even by their own metrics, and I can get into that. Before we get into that, Ellie, I work within the confines of the news, so I want to get to the other piece of the Bannon story for your reaction, and then we'll do Navarro, because this broke late in the day. To be clear with viewers, this is coincidental, unrelated to tonight's vote, because they're on different schedules. You have a judge limiting Bannon's attempted defense, Ellie. I'm reading here from some coverage. Bannon cannot even argue, that is to say, cannot even claim at trial under the rules that he's somehow not guilty, acting on the advice of his lawyer, who told him that because of executive privilege, he should not respond to the subpoena. Just on that story, how does that continue to narrow Bannon's options at trial, Ellie?
Yeah, so Bannon's legal argument has always been what the scientists would call stupid. It has always been a dumb argument. He has no executive privilege. He was not working for the executive during the coup. So he's got nothing to stand on, and the judge is simply saying, you can't make stupid arguments in my court, Mr. Bannon. And so that's all it is. Like, but it goes to Michael Steele's point. Does it really matter? Because when is this trial actually going to happen? Is that going to happen before the midterms or after the midterms? Bannon's entire thing is to play it out, get to the midterms, get to some point where this committee becomes moot, right? And so he's still on track to do that, even as the court is knocking down the stupid arguments.
As the great Justice Learned Hand used to say, I'm going to let you finish. But I want to tell folks, because we are tracking the breaking news, the House vote is now underway. This is the C-SPAN style video that you see on your screen, but it's a big deal because we're past the committee level, we're past the process. Technically, 8+ minutes left, although they often run a little longer. But the voting is underway. Whether or not to hold these men in contempt, Democrats have projected that they have the votes. We will get the real numbers. I'm going to come back to Ellie and our guests, but as promised, Ellie and Michael, I want to show just what happened with Peter Navarro, because he was not on the first, second, or third list of witnesses. And yet, as he began to explain and speak out what he thought he was doing under questioning, he appeared 3 times here on the beat and pushed what he called a sweep plan that was going to somehow overturn the results of the election. Here is some of what he said to me on the beat. The question for the start of the interview.
We'll disagree about that.
But the question for the start of the interview is, I just want to make sure here that we're kind of going by rules of the road. The question is, and you'll get time to talk.
You got to say that. And what I'm saying is that
I don't have to say anything, sir. I'm asking you. The question is, do you realize you are describing a coup?
No, I totally reject many of your premises there. Ari, look, you're doing your prosecutor thing. How about you give me a chance to talk now? Is that okay?
It would follow from your contention that you think Vice President Harris will ultimately have the call over who should be president, regardless of the results in the next election?
See, you misconstrued the whole Green Bay sweep plan.
It seems like it's making you stretch when we just changed the name from Pence to Harris. Are you holding the contention? If you say all those things out here, why risk a legal battle or going to jail to refuse to discuss them with the committee under oath?
Because I have a loyalty to the Constitution and a loyalty to the president. It's not my privilege to waive.
So he claimed, and Navarro did take the questions as mentioned. He also defied the lawful subpoena. He also claimed that he thought he was entitled to privilege, as I was discussing with the guests. But there was a clear shredding of aspects of the privilege claim by discussing all of this in public. And then the January 6th committee used some of these interviews you just saw as evidence for the case for contempt.